Hello, adventurers. We are Dark Alchemy. I'm here with my fellow Dark Alchemist, the Dead Professor,
Hi, I'm Scott.
and I'm interviewing today Yang, who is a dungeon master, dungeon player, and author of various Dungeon Dragons maps and adventures.
Hey, I'm Yang Yan Zhao. Thanks for having me on.
Good. I am Dungeon Master Roy, your Dark Alchemist, and we're going to be delving into the world of horror, the Empire of the Undying Sun on Kickstarter, and Yang's next campaign, and talk about some map making and talk about some Dungeons and Dragons horror. But let's first jump in with Yang, and we always like to ask, can you share a story in the Dungeons and Dragons world about a player or your own character or something funny that happened or something scary that happened?
So I was in a campaign with a bunch of guys for about 3 years, and I was playing a wizard. And one of the problems with playing a wizard is the wizard is far smarter than I am. So it's kind of hard to play someone smarter than yourself, except for one time. We were at the end of the campaign. We were in hell. And the DM, he set up his world so that time flows differently in the different realms. So like 1 minute in hell is like a year in the material plane, which is like 20 years in heaven, the heavenly planes. So I had a cloak that allowed me to teleport instantly to the astral plane. So in the combat, the only time I was smarter or as smart as my character, I used all my high level spells, and we were trying to keep this book away from it for some reason. So I grabbed the book, teleported into the astral plane, and tell everyone, "I'll be right back." And because of the time difference, I was able to cast a magic mansion and have a month vacation where I burned the book, and then I came back on the next round of combat with all my spells fully recharged.
Nice. Come with your nice freshly pressed clothes. You know, you have your little champagne glass in your hand, and this is nice and relaxing. Cool.
He was getting massages the whole time. It was great.
I love it. Yeah, I have a wizard in our current campaign. In the Age of Secrets, and I have a 20 intelligence. Sometimes it doesn't come across like I have a 20 intelligence, but we'll have fun with it. Anything to say there, Scott?
Nope. Stay silent. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Yeah.
It's more than
so
I'm worried about.
The wisdom I should actually lower. Yeah. So our dungeon master likes to throw us some twists, and he usually waits till Scott leaves the room before he brings out the magic item that's gonna mess with everything. So
clear trap.
So day one, where it get introduced, and we have our own world in Erendor. Eventually, it's going to lead into the Vecna campaign. So day one, he gives us a couple little mini powers, clairvoyance, stuff like this, and I call out just to the heavens. I'm like, I could use some help. And a scroll of Summon Devil appears. It's a 6th level scroll, and I'm like 3rd level. And well, Dave, what's that for? He's like, I don't know. Do you want to use it? And so now it's kind of hidden away. And then Scott's just shaking his head, like, why did you give him that? And Dave just wants to mess with him.
But he conveniently always gives it to Roy because he's the only one who might take the bait.
Yeah, exactly. So let's
do what you gotta do.
Let's get into some Dungeons and Dragons horror here. Let us see if I can add the Empire of the Dying Sun to the stage. And so why don't you kick us off, Yang, and just tell us a little bit about this world that you created.
So Empire of the Undying Sun, it basically started as a one-shot where there was 1 week with my regular group that most of the people couldn't come. And I said, for anyone who's left, I'll run a one-shot. And I did sort of a haunted house type story. And it was fun. And then even after, there were a bunch of things that I just sort of hand waved away as a DM because it was a one shot, and who cares, right? But people kept asking me about it. A month later, they're like, well, what was that thing that we had to pick up at the house? and I had told, they said, oh, we want to take horses out to this house that's in the middle of the woods. I said, oh, you can't. All the horses have been eviscerated. And they're like, what?
Oh.
I was like, yeah, by the monster. It was a few months ago. Don't worry about that. And then, they kept asking me things like that. And I said, well, I should maybe write some of these things down. And then I was actually going to make a comic book set in this world. But then I decided, while I was doing it, like, how hard would it be to make a campaign guide?
Okay.
And then 5 years later, I finally got around to the Kickstarter.
I think everybody who's been playing Dungeons and Dragons a long time eventually wants it to grow into some sort of world building and storytelling, right? Life is about story.
Yeah.
And then you actually got to that point. So speaking of a growing and starting, can you tell us a little bit about how you started in Dungeons and Dragons?
So it depends on how you look at it. Back in the 90s, it's probably like 90, 91. I had the books for second edition. I had the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, and the Monster Compendium, which was an ungodly large Trapper Keeper full of monster pages. And then,
Right.
but I couldn't find anyone to play because this was like sort of near the tail end of the Satanic Panic. And it was the time where Dungeons and Dragons had become for nerds. So for whatever reason, my friends and I, we played Marvel superhero role-playing game instead. And I never really got back into it until like 2016. I had really bad pneumonia and I was out of work for 6 months. Could barely get out of bed most days. So I was just like watching a lot of videos, and I started watching Critical Role, and I started getting more interested in at that time, 5e was the new version of Dungeons and Dragons. So when I got better, I found a group and started playing. And that was the official time when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons proper.
Yeah, Critical Role has really been inspiration for many people to get back into it. And I have no problem with the 5e rules. I enjoy it. I think it's a good system. There's some hate here and there, but we're having a great time, right, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, we adopted 2024 pretty quick, and patches some holes, and then you find other holes that opened up.
So I've been falling down the horror rabbit hole. We have the Erendor campaign where they're fighting swamp zombies. We have Monster Hunters, the Silver Fang Society, and we've been 3D printing these different creatures. And as I print these models from these different artists, I'm inspired to say, oh, how would this creature fit into a horror campaign? Or, some of these artists come out with some real creepy prints. As I was saying before, there was this creature. It was like a giant's head with like some tentacles under it, like a giant voodoo doll. So can you tell me how you handle horror in your Empire of the Undying Sun campaign, or how you kind of look at horror in D&D as a game master?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my philosophy on when you're writing games or you're going to be a dungeon master is feels over everything. And before you accuse me of having blue hair and a nose ring, what I mean by that is the game system you play and the setting and the rules and the characters, they all have to support whatever kind of game it is you're trying to play. So like if you look at like let's say D&D 1E, right? It's a very good fantasy adventure game, and you can get dark fantasy, but there's certain parts of it that, as written, are not going to be as strong for horror. Whereas if you look at a game like Call of Cthulhu, baked into the system, you have like the mental stressors that's going to add anxiety to the characters. So you can pull that sanity mechanic and throw it into D&D, and it would work just fine. And it might make the game play better horror. But if you took it out from Call of Cthulhu, that would definitely make the game worse.
Yes.
So that's what I mean. So you have to figure out what system you're using. And when I decided to use the 2014 this is before 2024 came out. So when I decided to use 5e, I started saying, okay, what are the pros and cons for it? And so I said, well, it has to start at level 1, because one of the aspects of horror, good horror, is that the people who are the potential victims, they're always weaker. They're like on their back foot the whole time. They don't have the supplies they need. They're not strong. They're not armed. So you got to start from level 1 when characters are the weakest. You can't.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a high level horror campaign in 5e.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we play Call of Cthulhu too. We've actually run some at conventions, and that's our alternative game, even though D&D is our game of choice. And in Call of Cthulhu, the sanity system, like you said, has a big effect. But even the characters, they never really get to the point where they are ultra powerful. You could play a Call of Cthulhu campaign to be, 10 adventures in, and your skills might be better, and the equipment might be a little bit better. But if one of these bigger nasty show up, you still could go insane.
You still got 12 hit points, sir.
You still get squished real easy, like you said. And then where if you have a 10th level fighter as opposed to a first level fighter, well, he might see a big baddie and say, "Well, I'm going to wade in and I'm going to take him out and be able to, right?" Well, what about like in the Undying Sun world, the types of horror creatures we come across, and also I was reading there was a little bit of a dream mechanic where it's kind of a Freddy Krueger situation, and that's kind of intriguing to me too. I hadn't really thought about that to add to our own campaign.
When you look at horror, there's all sorts of different kinds. Like you could go the Ravenloft Curse of Strahd way, which is more like gothic, universal monsters type horror. But for me, that's not what I wanted to do. That's more European, where you have it's more like class-based, sexual improprieties versus norms, like in Dracula. You have fear of the future in Frankenstein. So instead, I went more American horror, where starts off more New England, like with Ichabod Crane. There's something in the woods, something that's not right. Fear of the others, and fear of losing yourself, and kind of I would put aliens in there, although there's no like spacecraft and little green men in this. But
alien environments. I mean, even like you take like The Last of Us, and we had our swamp zombies. Compared to a regular humanoid, elf, dwarf. If something comes out, it's covered in fungus, and these mushrooms are growing out of the stomach, and half the head is bursting out. That feels very alien. That's not a normal condition, and that's not a place you want to be. Professor, we talked about our last episode with the swamp zombies, and we went through a bunch of different zombies. There was one that it spread like this pox disease, and it could get really bad fast. And I was like, "Oh, we could take out a village." And then Scott's like, "No, think about this in a city."
Yeah, I said in a confined environment of a medieval city, this would be cataclysmic.
Yeah.
So diseases and curses are something that there's a lot of. So I've sort of designed it in several ways, where I have like a chapter on recommendations for how you can play the game if you want it. If you want it on easy mode, forget curses, forget diseases. There's certain things that happen that take away death saving throws. Just keep those in. But if you want like a harder game, a grittier game, closer to like what people would have played in 1E, then you start adding those things in where getting those herbs actually does matter, because you could be diseased, the village could be diseased. So there's a lot of that. And then, you'd mentioned the dream world. I always thought the astral plane in D&D was pretty lame. It just ended up being like another place. So it didn't make sense for me. So I wanted it to be more like how Chris Claremont saw psychic combat in his X-Men series, where like Professor X would all of a sudden make himself look like a knight in shining armor to fight another telepath. So in it, the mechanic is everybody goes into the dream realm when they sleep, but most people forget what happens when you wake up. So if like you and your friend ever had the same dream and you're like, oh, that's crazy, it's because in your dreams you actually met. So in this game, in your dreams, you can go and you can meet people who have been dead. That's one of the main places where gods and spirits will speak to you in your dreams. But also there are some malevolent entities, or maybe you just pissed off the wrong person, and they can attack you in your dreams. And so in 5e, there's a long rest mechanic, which usually resets all your hit points and spells and whatnot. So you can have your rest interrupted by having nightmares, and you don't get the benefits of that. So there are, like I mentioned, creatures and whatnot who know things that it would be beneficial to you to go into this world. And there are people in the waking world who can go into the dream world and attack you. But should players just think about that, they can do the same thing. And the goal is, like, should players run afoul of these creatures, now you've got Freddy Krueger haunting their dreams, or they can become somebody else's Freddy Krueger.
So how often would you have the dreams in the campaign? Would you say, okay, somebody specifically says, I need to seek knowledge, I want to talk to my goddess, commune with my god, because I'm a cleric? Or do you have a random table where you say, okay, this might be a night that's interrupted? Or if they're in a certain location, they're in the haunted house, and then every night, you might be affected by their dreams. As a game master, how often do you kind of let this happen?
That's a great question. So level 3, there's intentionally part of that level where you have to go in it, because that's where you learn the mechanics and you learn how to do that. You don't have to do that any other time until level 9. There's some interactions that requires the dream realm. But during that time, there are gods who will communicate with you in your dream. So you're not necessarily initiating. But the characters themselves, if they want advice for their god, or they want to find certain things, there are certain magical items in the world that, if you could, that some creatures that have been dead or have been living for, hundreds of thousands of years, they might know where they are. So you could, when you discover this fact, you could go ask them for help or try to get them to reveal locations. So it's I leave it up to the players. It's how much they want to use it.
So you can use it as an adventure catalyst. Your players want to find something. The dream world might be where they get their clue, as opposed to another campaign. It might be they go search in a library or something like that. This is just another avenue.
Exactly.
That adventure hook.
And one of the reasons is like you need a town of or a city of significant size to have a library. Or, you have to be at the right place to find someone who happens to know this thing. Otherwise, it's like, well, you don't have that. Right. So you could either, as a DM, you could fudge that and then you risk making it too easy, or this is another mechanic by which the players can get clues and solve problems.
Right. And it's probably not going to be, it's, in that buried in that tree stump down the street. It's going to be some puzzle or riddle type clue, a more in-depth clue leading them to some place, and who knows what they have to do when they get there.
Yeah, and there's also mechanics where, like I mentioned, usually you forget what happens in the dream. So you might go do things in the dream world, and based on some rolls, you might forget the whole thing. There's certain items. So there's like drug use and stimulant use in the game. You never have to, but they can help you remember this stuff. And there's magical items.
It's got a very feel from the dream world, from the Wheel of Time series of books, where everybody dreams, but not everybody remembers, and then the dream walkers could go into people's dreams. It's very kind of similar. I mean, it's been throughout mythology and like that type of mechanic, but it's very similar to that.
That's interesting. I've never read Wheel of Time, but I might have to now.
It's got a whole wheel. It's got a whole dream mechanic, and that it's kind of a lost art, and they some of the characters they meet in the storyline, bring it back and teach them how to teach one of them how to walk their dreams because she's able to.
Oh, very cool.
The Wheel of Time is available on Amazon now. I think they're going to the 3rd season, but
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's not the same as the books. Did they cancel it?
Yeah.
Oh, I should put some I should put some. I should put some breaking news up there.
Breaking news.
Breaking news: The Wheel of Time season 3 has been canceled. Scott, any news on why? Oh, season 4. Any update on why they canceled it, or did you hear anything?
Too expensive to film, not enough viewership. Same old story.
Yeah, fair enough. But the books are still out there, and the books are good. Yeah. But they're immersive.
Books are phenomenal,
and they're long, and probably better, honestly.
Yeah,
certain stuff does translate.
Yeah, but you're talking about, I think, what is it, 12 books, and Jesus, they're 500 to 1,000 pages each. It's a long read.
Yeah. Maybe that might be good for the old Audible to listen to while you're painting or something like that. So Yang, I see you have new monsters and items here. Again, this is from the Kickstarter. Any monsters stand out that you created, or any thought process on the creation of monsters? We were going through some zombies ourselves last week, and we were kind of making our own and looking to create monsters for the world of Erendor specific to there. And we also, so the monster manual sometimes falls short, and it's not their fault. It's just the room that they're given. You'll have a zombie description, and you'll have the same kind of standard thing on the bottom. And you'll have a description of a dragon. He'll have lair actions and all these abilities. But then there's not much else. It really doesn't say, how he would act or what he would do. He might have an intelligence of 26 and a wisdom of 26, but how do you actually play that?
Yeah.
So for you, do any monsters in your book stand out? And have you added anything where you kind of try to guide the dungeon masters, like how this monster might act, or any additional lore or information above and beyond the basic stat block?
Yes, to all.
Okay,
so
cool.
First of all, when I started, really in 2019, I was just using monsters straight out of the monster manual. But then the OpenGL crisis happened. Yes. And I said, oh, crap, now I have to go through and redo everything. So I did, which is one reason why it took so long. And then
they changed it back and said, oh, you can do what you want. Like, oh, no.
Fool me once, Wizards of the Coast.
Exactly.
So everything is a little different. The other thing was, once you get people who've played 5e for so long, or even any Dungeons and Dragons, it becomes kind of like, okay, you need to use fire on a troll. So it's hard not to metagame. So I, other than like commoners or like a deer or something, all the monsters have different, at least slightly different stats, and they'll have different abilities. But I think one crowd favorite is, I mentioned the haunted house. That became level 4 in the campaign guide. And the way it's set up is like by almost everyone who's played that module, by the end, they're like, F this house. So there's all sorts of creepy stuff going on at the beginning, and you end up in the basement, and there's a creature that is like psychically invading your mind, torturing you. So assuming you beat it, you think, oh, good, it's done. You grab the item you were sent to get, and you hightail it out. Well, as soon as you leave the house with that item, the house stands up on legs, and the chimneys become arms, and you're on this hill that's surrounded by trees. The trees come alive to trap you there, and the house tells you, return the item, or it will kill you. So at that point, everyone's like tired and like, what the F? And they've used most of their spells, because the previous fight felt like it should be the boss fight.
You made a house fighting pit, like an arena or coliseum, and the house is in the middle. So they actually have some 3D prints of like these houses that look like I think we have a giant mimic house, right, Scott?
A house mimic, a normal version, and then a totally mimicked out version.
Yeah. I can see that on a table, people trying to, hit the house. And houses, you cut into a creature, but you hit the house and it's made of wood and stone and chimney arms. I mean, that's going to be it's going to make you hate the house even more.
Yeah. This house, it shoots cones of fire out of the chimneys at people. And it's styled like a craftsman house. So it's got this wraparound porch in the front that becomes like a mouth, and it will try to bite you. And if it does bite you, it can try to swallow you. And the inside of the house is on fire at this point. So,
Oh wow! So you're back in the house, and you're like, "Well, I'm just inside. I'm okay," but it's on fire, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That is awesome. I love it.
Um,
So you're also a bit of a map maker. I see here we have the Warehouse
Mhm.
Hideout by Yang, and well drawn, nice black and white drawing.
Thank
How
you.
do you feel? How do you feel about maps in the game? Tell us a bit about your map making process. And when you play, do you use
Mhm.
miniatures or is it all theater of the mind?
That's a good question. Well, I think you need maps um, for various reasons. One is, some people are very visual thinkers, and I could describe something and they would be able to picture it perfectly in their mind. But then there's other people who, they're unable to picture things in their mind. So it becomes hard for them uh, to understand like where the monsters and where the characters are oriented, and it becomes hard to run combat. So I think, first of all, just giving them basic maps, simple maps, even if they're just like boxes denoting, how large a room is or something.
Yeah.
That's good. And then I think modern players, they like battle maps, and everybody wants to have little miniatures. So I think if you're making a game, you like a full campaign guide. If it's just a module, maybe you can get away without having it. But if you're doing a campaign guide, I think you really need to have proper battle mats that people can use.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. In our campaign, our players love to see maps. We put this 3D printed terrain down. Sometimes we'll use a rollout map with a marker, water erase. The dead professor over here, he has a nice game room, which is like a tavern within his garage. He totally converts his garage into our Dungeons and Dragons player. It's awesome. And he has an overhead projector, and we shine it down, almost like the reverse of a TV, right?
Yep.
So we can have different maps. And Professor, you recently fell down a rabbit hole, didn't you?
Yes, I did. When I decided to install this projector in the room, I decided, well, I got to get maps, so there's a number of people out there who have Patreons and various services to make maps. And now I think I've got, a terabyte full of battle maps to be projected. And then I found a great Patreon by Tom Cardos, and he does modular maps so you can make your own. So now I had to learn
Nice.
Photoshop to use the modules. It's always learning something new.
Yeah, and we have a friend who has a giant format printer, prints like 3 feet by unlimited. So then the professor will say, "Hey, I made this map. Can you print it?" And then the next week, on his giant game table, which is what 6 foot or
8.5 by 4.5.
8.5 by 4.5. There's a giant map down there, and it's in full color print to the 5 foot scale. And we start putting the inches down, and it gets really tactical for the players. I feel like the storytelling becomes a tactical board game, and we're big fans of board games in general. We like playing all the different ones, but this is a board game, and it's always going to be a fighting board game, right? Because we're in Dungeons and Dragons, and there's going to be a monster, there's going to be characters, but it becomes a fighting board game that's always a little bit different, and you have always have different creatures. And I tell you, when you see the players playing, and they're actually, it's not even their turn yet, and you see them going 1, 5, 10 feet. I'm 35 feet away. Okay, I can sneak around, and I'll be within 5 feet. I'll take my action, and then I can do this. Like, they're really thinking like they were playing in the World Series of Poker, the Olympics. These tactics, it's amazing. It's amazing with the maps, how much they bring to life the table.
Yeah, I think so. And and I think when you get the map, it's much easier to add environmental effects to it. Like the fifth level, you start off in this town called South Bay, and your events at that farmhouse lead to basically an invasion of the undead, where there are thousands that are trying to get into South Bay, and there aren't very many town guards. So a lot of it is you're trying to evacuate people and trying to escape yourself. And as you play, like the town, there's so much blood and gore that you constantly have to make dexterity checks to see if you can run.
Nice.
And like the town is on fire, so you have all this smoke, so now you have reduced visibility. And I think that's one thing that a map can really add to it, because once you sort of have like the sense of the basics of what an area looks like, then you can start adding those effects. And when you add those effects, it can really change up combat, because you want to provide intellectual challenges to the players. Like, it's not always, solve this riddle or find the combination to this. It's okay, the conditions on the battlefield have changed. You can't see nearly as well. You might not be able to run there. So what can you do? The players say, oh, well, we'll go in the sewers, or we'll hop from rooftop to rooftop to avoid the zombies. Give them the ability to make more decisions. And for you as a DM, it doesn't matter how they want to try to accomplish the goal, but you also give them I hate the word agency, but you give them at least the illusion of more agency, because they're making more decisions in how they get to that end goal.
And as a dungeon master, it can be very fun, because sometimes you'll give them some ideas on a map, or I don't want to say clues, but you'll have the map set up, and well, they can go this way to the sewer, and then go this way to the rooftop, or maybe they'll try to put the fire through the fog, and then they say to you, well, I'm going to do this, and you're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Okay, that's what you want. That's what you want to do. You give it a try,
and that's great.
Yeah, no, it's great. And the dungeon master sometimes likes to experience a story too, or has a story to tell and wants to see how it evolves, maybe not as they expected. And also, you all want to sit around and have a good laugh sometimes when something goes right or goes wrong. So with the Empire of the Undying Sun, I'd like to just kind of ask you from my own knowledge, and maybe our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating a digital file as opposed to a book, and the Kickstarter and the publishing process, and just whatever experiences, good or bad, you had with Kickstarter, and trying to now become a printer or going into a press, type of situation?
So the basic starting process is pretty similar. So I ended up using a program called Affinity Publisher, which is pretty good. You can get the Affinity suite of products. Sometimes they have sales. I think I bought 3 or 4 programs for like $85. And sort of the big daddy in the game right now is Adobe, with InDesign is their book layout program. Illustrator is
for graphics.
For graphics, and then Photoshop would also be for graphics. Affinity, they have publisher, designer, and photo, or something like that. So first it starts with researching. I looked at a million other books, and especially the books that Wizards of the Coast put out. And I said, okay, how can I make it? I want to take good features, like good, clean layout and things like that. How can I make it easy to read? How can I make it so there's technically 2 books. There's the campaign guide and the player's guide. The campaign guide is aimed at DMs, and it's how to make their life much easier in terms of like how the information's laid out, and in the writing, explaining things like, hey, if this happens in this chapter, it will affect something 8 chapters down, so be aware of that. And then trying to figure out like, okay, where do I need images and whatnot, putting it all together in Publisher. And Publisher, you could easily learn how to use it in a weekend. It's not really complicated. There's a ton of YouTube tutorials. So for any university. So and then all you have to do is when you're done, spit that out as a PDF, and you're ready to go. Anyone who's interested in making modules or a book, I recommend starting there, and and probably make some mistakes along the way, but that's all right. You'll fix it up. It's a PDF. So, as I'm releasing this book, as I get chapters sort of finished up, I release it for the backers, and they can start playing or getting ready with it. So if I find that I did make a mistake, I just go back, and in the next update, I just upload the changes in the file, and that's that.
Send it back out. Did you for the I mean, I do like the PDFs, but I also like to have the physical book. Physical book, did you decide upon a size to match the current Dungeon Master books the current Dungeons and Dragons books in general? Did you have a different size in mind?
No, I wanted something that would sit on a shelf and look like it belonged with them. I could have done something smaller. It would have been cheaper. Would have been nice. But it needs to feel like it fits in with the other books, not like it's like the weird stepbrother or something. So there's that, and then you just have to go looking for different printers and start getting quotes. Like I had a friend who won some Ennie awards for playing games, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, try this printer." And I contacted them, and they're like, "Okay, it's a 1,000 unit minimum order." It's like, "Wow, crap! I don't have 1,000 people buying my book." So I was kind of locked out of that. China has cheaper printing. I found some Eastern Europeans, like one in Lithuania. They have a little bit cheaper printing. I looked into a lot of American printers, which I would like to do, but there's two real problems with them. One is the cost is usually more expensive, and I'm okay with more expensive to a certain extent. But the other is a lot of them don't want to deal with small publishers.
Really?
Yeah. So for something like this, it would be considered a short run, which is, when you have relatively few copies that you need. Now, of course, you're always going to buy more copies than you have orders, so you can sell more in the future. But, if you're like 100 or less, it's really considered a short run, and a lot just aren't interested. It's for them. They don't think it's worth it. Especially now there's various tariffs. So more people are trying to look into printing in the US. Short
runs usually have fairly significant setup charges, right? That you have to absorb now through the cost, and that's where it really starts to hurt. When you're printing 1,000, that setup charge is divided by 1,000. When you're printing 100, it's 10 times higher per book. So
Oh, so it's really about the setup charges. Yeah, I mean, we don't like to get political here, but the tariffs do affect printing, and we want to print in America, but that has been outsourced since the 80s and 90s, and it was just part of the overall political climate, and you get used to it, and all of a sudden, one day, oh, it's different now. Oh, great! Now what do I do? So maybe we need to start up our own printing.
Did you offer hardcover or softcover, or was it an option? And I'm just curious if the printing was different for hard versus soft.
I just went with hard. Again, I wanted it to feel like it fit, like it should be on that shelf with your Dungeon Master's Guide. Whereas a soft cover, it doesn't. It would be cheaper. That's for sure. Everything is black and white, luckily, except for maybe the cover. So that saved me a bit on cost once I realized I should do that.
Full color, probably much more expensive.
The original, the original Monster Manual had all these creatures, and there was a bunch of different artists. I'm not really great with the artist names. That's something that I know Yang, you're a little bit better with, or our friend John from John's Long Box. We'll shout out to him. He's better with the artist names. But the original artists were giving, A, B, C, D monster. Here you go, and draw a black and white picture of them, and then E, F, G, H. You draw the picture of it, and it was all black and white. And back then it was cool. So doing black and white might feel a little bit retro, but I'm okay with it.
Well, one of the things I wanted to do with this is I wanted the feel a grittier game. I wanted it to feel like the feeling you had when you were playing 1E versus 5E, where it's like, you just can't die and you're sort of walking through a story. So when originally I was planning to do it all in color, And then when people started turning in the art, especially Peter Gilmore, I was looking at it because I was originally going to color it myself, everything myself. And I said, shit, I can't make that look any better with color. It's got to be black and white. And then I was like, well, if these are black and white, the other ones are going to look weird if they're in color. And then I realized, you know what? It's just all black and white now.
Now, you're a bit of a comic book guy too. So is that coming from a comic book background, enjoying different comic book styles and art?
Well, I think most North American comics, at least, they're always in color. We don't really do a lot of black and white here. So I think that was part of my vision. And
novel.
yeah. And then if you look at, the most of the modern books, at least from 2E on, it's all in color for Dungeons and Dragons. So I thought, well, that was my default setting. But then, I realized, like, especially since it's a horror campaign, black and white makes sense. If you were doing like romantic fantasy, it would be weird. But for horror, that stark black and white contrast with some grays, it's a lot better.
Yeah. What I like about having a hardcover book on my collection on my shelf is I'll be doing a homebrew campaign and I picked up at I think it was Adepticon or one of the conventions, maybe it was even Gen Con. There was a guy who was selling a book called Tavern Tales. And it was, the Dungeons & Dragons adventure starts in a tavern classic. But, his kind of point of view was that a lot of adventures don't start in a tavern anymore. He wanted to go back to that. But I was reading it recently, and he has a whole gambling system in there, tavern gambling, tavern games, and, charts for it. And we're doing our Swamp Town, and there's a tavern there. They haven't explored it yet. I was like, okay, great. When they go in there, I'm going to bring this book with me, and there's going to be a game going on. And they can jump into the game. So now with your book, which I'm going to pick up, it's going to be horror, and then there's dreamlands and new spells and monsters. I can be like, I need a different monster, or I think they need to have a dream tonight. I'll reach up off the shelf, pull it off, and I have a whole section on dreams and horror that I can just plug into my campaign, even if I'm not specifically using your world setting. There's a lot of other assets I can pull out of it. And I think that's a great thing to have.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was one of my intentions is a certain amount of stuff. So that I have a class, which is an empath, which they take powers from others. Basically, they don't have a lot of powers on their own, but they can copy powers of like a teammate, or they can steal abilities from creatures you fight. That could be imported anywhere. And then I have a talent tree system. In my opinion, feats are cancer, because like everything is a trade-off. So like if you're playing a barbarian, you say, I'm all in on physical combat, but you shouldn't get magic, right? And if you're a wizard, you have decided like, well, I'm going to forego any sort of martial abilities and any physical abilities. In exchange, I get to bend the rules of nature. So when you have certain feats like a warcaster, which allows you to cast distance spells right up next to someone and avoid the penalties, like to me, that's not good. Instead, the talent tree, it works with your skills and abilities. So you're doubling down on the skills that you have and getting more advantages. So there's different paths you can go down in the talent tree. So for example, if you have proficiency in religion, there's 3 paths you can go down on the talent tree. So one is the path of the prophet. So you would get bonuses when you're trying to convert people to your religion, which may or may not be something your god wants. The second is the Inquisitor, where you don't get any extra benefits to your religion, but you would get benefits against a different religion. So if you worship a god of good, you may have benefits against the servant of a god of evil. And the third is the heretic, where you gain special knowledge about your religion or about your god that other people don't have, but most people in your religion would hate you. They would see you as an outsider, but you gain extra special knowledge. So, and every skill has similar things.
This sounds like a lot of work. If you were doing this for 2014 rules,
Mhm.
you were doing this for every basically skill or every different
Yep.
class. It was like
Every skill. Every skill.
every skill. Oh wow, that sounds like a lot of work. But yeah, that might be a good way. And you can even drop that in too. You could add the talent tree system to it.
Yeah,
The
perfectly grafts on.
the professor's playing a sorcerer, a divine soul sorceress,
Mhm.
and he's thinking about cleric because he wants to start to spread the word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised. Like, for medicine, one of the abilities or one of the paths is a surgeon. So
Okay.
originally I thought, okay, well, this would be good for like medical checks. You're sort of like Dr. Watson. You can figure out how people died and this and that. But I've had players take it where there's no, like, you sort of have to make it your advantage. There's nothing in the game that's like, oh, we need a surgeon right now. But you could find yourself in that situation, like, if people are injured during a battle, or townsfolk that are injured or diseased, you can put that to your advantage, and then you gain a better reputation with these people.
Well, that brings up a question since you mentioned it that way. Is your world is the Undying Sun world, or the kinds of worlds I like to play in? Are they high or low magic? So if you have a high magic world where it's healing's pretty common, you might not need a surgeon as much, or there might not be any, because most people are just bring them to the local cleric, they'll be healed. But a low magic world where maybe a healing potion is like super rare. I've heard about that. They took a potion once when I was a kid, and there's one person who has a magic sword, and hopefully he can slay the dragon because it's a +1 sword. And if it's rare, then yeah, you're gonna need a surgeon. You're gonna need that talent tree. So how do you feel about magic in your campaigns?
I like low magic. So the country you start out in, that South Bay is in, there's virtually no magic, and if people saw you use real magic, they would freak out. There's an organization of paladins that travel around the continent, investigating people who use magic or magic items, and if they find, so you can be a wizard, but you have to be registered. You would have had to gone to a university in the capital, and then they will certify you. And part of that is you have to agree to assist the government. You'd basically be drafted whenever the government needs you.
Yeah.
But if you don't, or maybe you just find a magic item in the woods somewhere, these paladins will come and kill you and your family, just to prevent magic. And there are in-world story reasons that will not be apparent to the players at the beginning, but the effects of it will be. And then you move into a different continent, where the Empire of the Undying Sun is, and things are more unregulated there. There are still groups that will kill magic users, because people, it would be like, here you think of it as devil worship, or things like that. Even if you don't particularly believe in it, like you're gonna stay away from devil worshippers. So there's that, and the vast majority of the people that you would ever meet who can do magic are relatively low level, but there are high level magicians in each country, and they're sort of for the government to help protect it.
You're really putting up a low magic world against, you have 100 new monsters in there, and some look pretty scary.
Yep.
So monster wise, it's dangerous, but it's really just good strength of steel and horse, and kind of the adventuring group, not being able to rely on magic as much to defeat these monsters, these creatures, right? That's pretty cool. So this campaign, this Kickstarter wrapped up, but you're still able to are you still able to order the PDFs and the books? Have you done the print run? What are you gonna do with that?
Not at
Work
the
in
moment.
progress.
So speaking of problems with Kickstarter, I screwed up, where Kickstarter now has a feature that when the campaign ends, I forget what they call it, but you're still able to purchase things later on.
Late backer.
Yeah, late backer. For whatever reason, when that was checked, it would not launch my campaign, so I had to uncheck it, and launch it without it. And then I went back in later to try to add it, and for whatever reason, it just wouldn't. So I have a website, which is like the whole litany of failures, trying to get a e-commerce store to work on it. But I am going to relaunch Empire of the Undying Sun this year in October, starting October 1. So it'll be slightly different. You're still going to be able to get the 5 ebooks, both PDF and print. There will be 1 ebooks, which I will have for PDF and for print. And
wait, you're gonna have first edition books for this?
Yep, I'm converting it. I've got a guy named the Dungeon Delver. I don't know if you know him, Bill Sylvie. So he had worked for Gary Gygax, designing modules for 1E, and he's done work for Heidi Gygax, Gary's daughter, converting her. She also writes modules, and she does 5E and goes to 1E. So I'm hiring him to convert it, and then in addition, so the first campaign, if you bought the print edition, you would also get 12 adventure modules. And these modules were meant to be like one-shots, something that you could play in like 3 to 6 hours in one sitting. But they're somewhat agnostic about location, but they're all technically set in the world of the Empire of the Undying Sun. So like I think between the campaign guide, level 1, level 2, level 2, level 3, and level 3 and level 4, there's like a 2-month period between those adventures. So you can easily, if you as the DM want more stuff in between those, you can take some of these modules and play them there. I intentionally designed it that way. You know, people these days like to write their own character backstories. So you could do, adventures based on their backstories between the main throughput. And also later on, like one level might take you 3 or 4 months to complete because you're on the move. So there's modules that you could plug in during the travel. So it's meant to be, it's set up so that you could play these things like a hex crawl, like an old school hex crawl. Or if you want to hand wave it and say, I don't like hex crawls, that's fine too. You can just move sort of from point to point, and you can have extra adventures in there along the way.
I like that. The first 3 modules will be Fairy Hill, The Will Assist, and The Rat King, all written by Bill Silvery, aka the Dungeon Devil, who used to write modules for Gary Gygax. So there is interest in first edition. We've gone to a bunch of conventions. The last one we played at was Long Island Tabletop. We ran Cthulhu, was switching over just to run D&D.
Nice.
But there was a lot of, not say a lot, but there was a few people running first edition. And it was just classic rules, low hit points, and just kind of deadly because people wanted to experience those old books. So to actually have new content coming out for first edition.
Nobody really wanted to experience being a first level wizard.
Well, some people signed up, Professor,
1
for the
missile spell and 4 hit points.
That's it. And a dagger. A dagger. Stab people with a dagger.
Or quarterstaff,
So Yang, we can find on YouTube at Yang Yan Zhao 4, right? And I think on YouTube you have some content up there. And I think you can get messages on YouTube. Is there anywhere else we can find you?
Twitter, also at Yang Yan Zhao 4. You can check out the website for my game, empireoftheundyingssun.com. Soon we're going to have a launch page for the campaign coming up in October. So there'll be more new information on the website at that point.
All right. So they can reach out to you at empireoftheundyingssun.com. And, keep an eye out on the Kickstarter. We have an Instagram channel also. You can find us at Dark Alchemy Ltd. That's Dark Alchemy Ltd, one word, on Instagram. And when the campaign comes out, let us know, and we'll post on there. Check out this Kickstarter. We'll probably want to pick up a book ourselves to add to the collection, especially to have that horror and that dream aspect. I like having the PDF in the book. If you buy the book, you get the PDF automatically, or is there a bundle you're going to have available?
Yeah. So the PDFs,
like that both.
Yeah, the PDF should be available pretty much right away when the campaign ends. People will be able to download it. The only thing is there will be some update for new art. Part of the what I want to do with the money from the campaign is I want to hire more artists for more awesome interior art like this. So you'll be able to get PDFs right away, all the rules, everything you need for both the campaign guide and the player's guide, and then. However long it takes me to get stuff printed, I will start shipping those out. The 1E books will ship a little later because I need the income from the campaign to be able to pay to convert the adventure from 5E to 1E.
Yeah, it's definitely Kickstarter is definitely a process. It's a great way nowadays to crowdfund, but I don't think people realize maybe how much actually work goes into it, especially if you're subcontracting out somebody art and stuff like that. Like, what makes you fall down that rabbit hole? Say, yeah, I want to give this a try. I can do this, no problem. And then, like you said, years later, you're like, wow, that was a lot of work.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think people don't realize just how much money you lose doing something like this. In sense of like one of my friends, he had a campaign guide, and I think his second campaign he got 120,000. So you think, wow, that's a ton of money. Well, it sounds that way until you figure the service Kickstarter is going to take 10%. So that's 12 grand right off the top. He had a marketing company. They're gonna, you're probably going to spend another 5-10% of the total cost in marketing, and then you've got to pay artists who, it could cost you hundreds of dollars for a single image. And why I encourage everyone to learn Affinity Publisher is because you want to save money as much as you can, and people to lay out your book, that's going to cost a lot of money. You've got physical print costs, and then whatever's left over, you're going to get taxed on.
The government's where's mine? You want to play these role-playing games? I got to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the state, if you're like in California or New York, you could easily end up paying 50% of whatever's left over to the government. So I think my friend was telling me, he got he got 120,000, but for like 2 years worth of work, he only got like 30 grand, which still is nothing to sneeze at, but it's a far cry from 120 grand.
Yeah. Well, if it's not his full-time job, hopefully it's a side job to do it. But that being said, if you break down the hours of what he did in those 2 years, it might have been like he was working 2 full-time jobs just to get all this done. When you look at the hours, like, oh my God, he's putting 1,500 hours a year into it to make the 30 grand. It's not a lot.
Exactly. And the other thing is, a lot of people, they want to transition over from whatever their day job is and make it make game making their full-time job. It's tough. 30 grand for 2 years work. That's 15 grand a year.
Yeah.
Tough industry to make a living in, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It is a tough industry. Well, I want to thank you for your time, The Empire of the Undying Sun. I was very curious to talk to you. Like I said, we're both mutual friends of John's Longbox, a comic guru, a fan of Marvel and Village and Vigilantes. And he said, might be a good fit to talk about D&D, and we love talking about Dungeons and Dragons and campaigns and just how it fits in. And hopefully people out there will look at your campaign and find something they could use into it, or maybe run the actual Empire of the Undying Sun themselves. So I want to thank you for your time, Yang. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Professor, any final parting questions?
Yang, just make sure you get us the link when you do go live on the new campaign, and we'll make sure to put it up. And every little bit helps, right?
Yeah, and we'll put the rest of your links in the show notes. This is a pre-recorded episode. We'll be airing this in about 2 weeks. Once again, you can follow Yang on the socials on YouTube at Yang Yan Zhao 4. That'll be down below. Also on X or Twitter. You can find us at Dark Alchemy Ltd at Instagram and on YouTube and on Etsy. And until next time, I hope everybody gets a chance to play a lot of games this week. All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.